I'm Lisa Sprinkle, and it's my pleasure as president of the Palliative Care Partnership of the Roanoke Valley to welcome you to this evening of fellowship and reflection on behalf of our board and our members. The Palliative Partnership, as you may have seen on a slide, exists to be a catalyst for community efforts that empower people to plan and exercise their choices for quality, palliative, and end-of-life care. I am delighted to share with you that our partnership has expanded significantly this year. We have a new or revitalized chapter in the New River Valley and a brand new chapter in the Shenandoah Valley. These chapters are with us virtually this evening as our presentation is being simulcast to watch parties in all those respective regions. In addition to that, not only are our NRV partners joining us from Blacksburg Presbyterian, our Shenandoah partners are joining us from Valley Health in Winchester, Virginia, and we have members of the Glebe Continuing Care Retirement Community in Daleville joining us. So if you'll just please take a moment and welcome all of our regions to this time together with me. We're honored to be joined this evening by Dr. Aditi Sethi Brown, a hospice and palliative care physician, musician, and end-of-life doula whose work helps guide individuals and families through the sacred transition at end of life. Dr. Sethi Brown brings not only clinical wisdom, but a deep reverence for the emotional, spiritual, and the communal aspects of dying. Tonight's conversation may be a reflection as well on the life and legacy of Ethan Sisser. Ethan was a young man whose journey with terminal illness became a powerful public exploration of how we might meet death with presence, vulnerability, and even beauty. The documentary entitled The Last Ecstatic Days is the testament of Ethan's will and his persistence to live well and die well. His choice to document his dying process online invited thousands of people into a shared space of raw humanity, breaking down walls of fear and silence, and even reminding us that in the face of death, there can be connection, meaning, and peace. Dr. Sethi Brown will guide us through the remarkable journey that dying invokes and will share insights on how we can embrace the inevitability of death with grace and understanding. This evening is not about having all the answers. Instead, it's an invitation. It's our invitation to each of you to listen deeply, to feel, to question, to open our hearts to the possibility that in talking about death, we're also learning how to truly and fully live. I recognize that many of us come to this space and time together tonight with a heart full of grief and the loss of someone we love. Some may come with different personal experiences, some just out of professional interest, some out of quiet curiosity. Regardless of the perspective with which you approach this time together, we welcome you into this space. And we hope it's one of honesty, tenderness, and shared learning. Before I formally welcome Dr. Sethi Brown to the stage, let me tell you just a little bit more about her. She is a distinguished physician in integrative medicine. She's a specialist known for her holistic and patient-centered approach to health care. With a strong foundation in internal medicine and extensive training in complementary therapies, Dr. Sethi Brown brings a unique perspective that bridges conventional medicine and science with integrative healing modalities. Over the course of her career, she's been a passionate advocate for wellness, prevention, and the mind-body connection in clinical practice. She's also recognized for her leadership in promoting evidence-based integrative care, her commitment to medical education, and her contributions to community health initiatives. Whether working in clinical settings, mentoring future healthcare professionals, or speaking at national and international conferences, Dr. Sethi Brown consistently exemplifies compassion, innovation, and excellence in the field of medicine. She completed her undergraduate education at Davidson College, where she earned a BA in religion and medicine. From there, she completed her medical training at the Medical College of Georgia School of Medicine. In addition to her duties as founder and director of the Center for Conscious Living and Dying, she served as associate medical director at Care Partners Solace Center in Asheville, North Carolina. She has served as adjunct faculty in the Department of Family Medicine at UNC Chapel Hill, and she serves individuals facing life-limiting illness as an attending physician with Amorum Hospice. Joining Dr. Sethi Brown tonight is her husband, Jay, whom we've already enjoyed. Jay was a hospice music therapist for 10 years and is now a professional musician. He plays in many bands in the Asheville area, including the Lazy Birds, I'm told. He is part of the Old Town Blues Country Roots Music Initiative. He's a one-man band throughout Black Mountain in Asheville, and he's part of Roots Grown Deep, the world music ensemble. Perhaps most importantly, he's part of the dynamic duo Aditi and Jay. Let's not forget that one. In addition, Jay is a devoted father to their 3 children, Sahana, 12, Avi, who is 9, and Tashi, who's 5, all of whom we hope to meet on the next trip to Roanoke. Thank you once again for being here, and please join me in welcoming Dr. Aditi Sethi Brown and Jay to our stage this evening.
Oh, thank you so much for that thoughtful introduction. And thank you all for your presence this evening. As we begin this exploration about bringing death back into life, I'd like to invite you to close your eyes and take a full inhale and a slow exhale. Once more, inhale fully, feeling the feet on the ground, and your low back supported by your chair, releasing any tensions that you brought in this space after you found parking and made your way into this historic theater. And exhale. Now bring to mind someone with whom you've shared moments of great joy. You can let that memory settle in the space around your heart. Take another deep breath in and out. Now I invite you to open your eyes and turn to your neighbor. And if you're in a row of just 3, you can speak among yourselves and just take a moment to quietly name the person that you brought to your awareness and their relationship to you. This little exercise brings us all into a state of coherence. A state that I first learned about through HeartMath, which is an institute and a set of technologies that are scientifically researched to study the relationship between the heart, the mind, the body, emotions. And they're tools for emotional regulation and stress reduction and resilience building. Tools that can help us as we engage in this conversation about mortality and perhaps even confront mortality for ourselves and those we love and care for. The definition of coherence that I return to again and again is a state of being where our heart, mind, body, and emotions are working together in cooperative, harmonious alignment. It's a way of presencing ourselves to whatever is in front of us, and this can reduce stress, anxiety, depression, and can enhance our interpersonal connections. It's often used with first responders as they go, from rescue to rescue. We recently experienced Hurricane Helene, and I hear that people use this technique, this technology, to really support them as they journeyed to save lives, really. So this evening, the intentions for our time together is to really explore death and return to this remembrance. We all have this remembrance, but we often forget that death is a natural and integral part of this life. And we want to explore ways that we can be present with one another during this time, as well as reflect on the ways death can deepen our understanding of life. So we'll weave songs and stories tonight. Music and the power of song is another way of integrating this information and this reality, not so much with our intellect, but also with our whole being. So we'll start with a song called Little Birdie.
Sing me one more pretty chorus.
So as Charles Dickens says, death is a mighty universal truth. It's the one thing that we all have in common. Some say the great equalizer. And we even share it with the animal beings like the little bird. We all know on some level that we are only here for a short time, passing through. And yet as a society and in community, we often forget that or somehow deny death's presence in our lives. And we've actually shied away from showing up for one another, and I'm generalizing here, but in these intimate, vulnerable times, for various reasons, which we'll discuss tonight. And in fact, I honor you for being here, because very few people would imagine spending their evening having this conversation. I think they're even gawking at us. I don't know if you can see this. Wow, you're here. So thank you. I think I'm supposed to point it this way. So I want to share a little bit about my journey, and thank you again for that beautiful introduction. You heard some of my journey to this moment. I was born in northern India, Chandigarh, and moved to Augusta, Georgia when I was 3 via London and Wales. And grew up in the South and had a beautiful community, beautiful family, and ended up going to Davidson College. And one of my first days at Davidson, first few days at Davidson, there was a volunteer fair, and they invited students into different to just share different offerings, like after-school programs and tutoring and things. And there was a Hospice of Charlotte booth set up, and this lovely woman came and invited me in. She said, "Let me tell you about hospice." And I didn't know what hospice was, and having even grown up in a family of physicians, I was unaware of what hospice was. And as she told me about the possibility of me as a young, insecure 17-year-old sitting at the bedside, learning the skills that I would need to show up for people in this intimate time, and preparing me to be a volunteer for hospice, I was so enthralled and shocked. And something about that resonated. Just the idea that we are mortal beings. Somehow it settled my nervous system. It's like, oh, all this stuff is temporary. And yet nobody's talking about it. So I ended up volunteering for hospice throughout undergraduate, those years. And it was quite a contrast going from the bedside of an unhoused man dying of AIDS to a social gathering and party on campus. And I just remember the paradox and also the simplicity I felt and the presence I felt at the bedside, and how that, I also noticed how it translated into my living days, my life. So fast forward, I ended up going to medical school at the Medical College of Georgia, and I think I see one of my old classmates. Is that you, Dan Lola? Welcome. And I realized there was no end-of-life care training pretty early on. And so second year of med school, I became sort of an activist, a quiet activist, and I brought lunch and learns to campus and educated people about hospice palliative care. And it was wonderful. I mean, I really appreciated being in that role. But then I started my clinical rotations, third and fourth year, and I witnessed deaths that were horrible. Having experienced home care with adequate supportive hospice care, these deaths were untended to, people were under-medicated, nobody was talking about death to their loved ones, and people were dying alone. And that really had an impact on me. Then I ended up going into family medicine in Asheville, and again, same thing. I'd have conversations with surgeons about someone in the ICU that was on his 7th surgery, and the surgeon would say, "I don't know why I'm operating on the guy, he's gonna die anyway." And I'm like, then why are you operating on the guy? And it just was mind-blowing. So then I specialized in hospice palliative care in Asheville, and worked in a 26-bed inpatient, a freestanding facility, which is such a blessing if you're lucky to have one in your community. And after 10 years of that, I started to notice, actually within 2 years, I noticed patterns that I realized maybe not the medical systems to rectify or remedy. And it was fear of people were coming to death terrified, unprepared, not having had conversations with their loved ones. You saw one of the statistics that was put up around 80% of people want to have conversations with their providers, and only 7% do. And there were a lot of family tensions that were not acknowledged or acknowledged at the bedside while their people's loved ones were dying. And I just noticed, I witnessed, I was in an observer role. And not much had changed in the 20 years I'd been involved with hospice care. So fast forward, you heard about this young man, Ethan Sisser, who invited community into his dying journey. And that was a catalyst, a life-changing experience. And a lot of that is captured in a documentary called The Last Ecstatic Days that you can see on PBS. And there was something about that journey where we invited other community members to care for a young man who didn't want to die in a facility, but was not given any other option. And we rallied and got him to a home setting and supported his dying days. And caring for him catalyzed me to leave my career as I knew it and step into, really, I didn't know what I was stepping into, but it's turned into community-supported end-of-life care. How can we empower communities? How can we empower you to know your wishes, to reflect on death now so that it's not such a shock when it shows up in your life? And that led me to found and currently support the Center for Conscious Living and Dying in Asheville. So I was speaking to kind of the what I was noticing, and started realizing that part of the reason we are not prepared to talk about death or to face the reality of death, and I want to say one thing. I am speaking of anticipated death that often comes after prolonged illness. There are two ways we die. One is anticipated after prolonged illness or sudden. And I want to honor those deaths that are traumatic and accidental. And that has a different trajectory and different set of circumstances, and honestly, a grief journey as well. And in this last year, 2024, my father died unexpectedly. I found a dear friend who died of a brain bleed, and Hurricane Helene happened. So I'm in that, working through those realities of that kind of dying journey. So what we're talking about tonight is really anticipated deaths that are after a prolonged illness. And so I started to realize that death isn't merely a medical event. And maybe that seems obvious to you all, but that had never occurred to me. When I started thinking about how people were approaching their dying days, it really was something that, death was something that happened or happens when the medical system can no longer care for you or doesn't have the technology to keep you alive. And so with that awareness that death is not a medical event, what is it? Besides a natural, integral part of life, it's a social, communal, relational, spiritual experience, if you think about it. And modern medicine has come a long way in extending life. We know that and we're grateful for it, but it's also created distance from the dying experience. And that's pretty recent in our human evolution. We've been around 350,000 years, and modern medicine, really, death moved away from the homes really in the 1950s or so. So it's pretty recent, but the impact is really significant. And the world is changing, as we know. I didn't have a smartphone until a few years ago, and I can't imagine life without it now. So, yeah, I think I'll leave it at that. Another piece is, aside from the medicalization of death, there's also an element of how the system, our family units, and because of mobility and urbanization and all the things, we are far away from many of our family members. That village life is no longer a part of our lived experience. And so children aren't around always to help with their elders who are dying. And that is just a reality, not good or bad, but it has impacted how we die. And we've often given the care of those dying up to healthcare professionals. We hire CNAs and RNs if we're able to. Agencies are short-staffed now. So it's almost imperative that we get creative around this conversation. And I want to say that at the heart of this conversation, us being removed from death, it's more of a curiosity. Like, how does that impact how we live our lives? And I'll share the impact of this conversation on my life. But it's something to consider. I find that the awareness of death really helps me acknowledge the preciousness of each moment, being here with you, being open to the mystery, and helps me fear death less, fear life less. So, all right. On that note, Not Afraid to Die by Gillian Welch. positions are a little clunky, sorry. All right. So one of the intentions was just to remember and return to this understanding that death is an integral, inherent part of this life. The second thing on that list was to speak to presencing ourselves to those who are facing this reality. And how to presence ourselves with that. So when I think about loving presence, few embody it like this woman, Paula Brown, who was my mother-in-law, his beloved mother, and a dear friend. I actually met her a few days before meeting Jay and fell in love with her first. And that's our little son, Avi, who's now 9. She was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer in May of 2019. After a year of decline, weight loss, nausea, symptoms that were nonspecific and were unclear as to why she was having, it was unclear why she was having those symptoms. And they didn't find the cancer until it was 2 months to go, and it was already inoperable. So she wasn't a surgical candidate, and with pancreatic cancer, which is often diagnosed late in its course, chemo wasn't an option either. And I don't know if she would have done it anyway. So she lived in Birmingham, Alabama, and this is her husband, Bud, and she wanted to be in Asheville for her last 2 months. I think she secretly wanted to move there in her living days, but had a lot of ties to Birmingham. So she chose to be with us in her final 2 months, trying alternative modalities, different juicing protocols, different herbs and supplements to see if she could buy time or potentially have a spontaneous remission. And Paula had a way of being fully present with whoever she was speaking to and making you feel so special. She could see you, she would see your soul and connect with your heart. So here's Jay in the back and Chris, her son. And you see a home setting, you see music, the guitar in the background, flowers, popsicles, mess, photos, just a home environment where she was really held in her final 2 months. When I think about being present to others in both life and death, because really, what is essential as you sit with people who are dying can really be applied to your living days, how you relate to one another in life. It doesn't have to be separate. So what you see here is quiet, stillness, presence, no movement. Granted, it's a still photo, but you can sense this is how they approached her care always. We did. There's deep listening. There's touch. Sometimes we're afraid to touch a dying person. So just remembering that there is the gift of touch, of course with permission. There was non-judgment. She was one of 7 sisters, and all of them showed up at various stages of her dying journey to support her. And even though some disagreed when she stopped doing the juicing because it was making her nauseous, they accepted with non-judgment, letting go of their desire to control. And they just showed up day in and day out to serve and support. We stayed grounded. We emoted and wept outside the room. But when we came into the room, we stayed in our full coherent state and supported her. I cried occasionally in front of her. I was pregnant with a third at the time. And her sister crawled into bed with her. Again, some people don't know they have permission to do this, to just be holding someone with loving presence. No agenda, not bringing our own fears to the bedside. And just being with. And that's another thing. As we contemplate mortality, if we're really going to sit with this reality of death, we have to slow down. And in our modern world, that isn't always easy to do. There's plenty to distract us. You may be wondering why we have all these pictures, so I just wanted to name. Jay's youngest aunt, the youngest of the 7, was a journalist, and that was her comfort zone, is being behind an iPad. So I think she took all these photos, unbeknownst to us. But I'm grateful for them, because again, we were allowed into this vulnerable time, and we get to share it with you all. This was when she took her final breath. Children were outside playing in the yard. We have a creek. And we just lovingly watched her let go of her breath. Leave her body, if you will. And then something that people don't remember sometimes is that after death, we have a right to care for the bodies of our loved ones, if we so choose. That's a whole nother conversation about after-death care. But so many of us have never had an experience of being with a dead body. And having been with my father now and my dear friend Tara, who died, I can't imagine another way of moving through the grief journey without this level of connection to the person who's died. To give me time to sort of accept and just breathe into this reality that they're no longer in their bodies. So we invited Sahana, our daughter at the time, she was probably 7, and we just said, hey, Sahana, we're going to tend to Nana's body. You don't have to have a funeral home in all states, tending to the body. And we said, Sahana, would you like to adorn her with flowers? And Sahana said yes. So she got to participate in this journey, the after-death care journey. And here she is in our music venue space. We have a music space in our house, and Paula's in the back, lying in honor, we call it. And the kids did artwork, played, came in and out of the room, and we got to normalize death and dying in a way that many children don't have the opportunity to do, because we want to protect our children. And we're afraid ourselves. They say that how we talk about death with our children is more important than what we say. They pick up on all the subtleties of our own discomfort, our own fear around death. So this is Paula lying in honor. And then we did a home green burial. There are several, I think about 11 conservation green burial grounds in the country. We're lucky to have one in Asheville. And we got to carry her body, shrouded body. Children were right next to her during the service. And then we got to lower her into the ground. No heavy machinery, no cement, no resources that were unnecessary. Just, again, a natural way to tend to a dead body. And then we got to close the grave and supported her to return to the earth. So, when I think of presence and accepting what is and being willing to be with the person who is dying, maybe with fear, with doubt, with trepidation, but with full acceptance. And it doesn't mean accepting that she's dying. It's just accepting this present moment, that this is what's happening. It's easier said than done sometimes, because it's emotional. But it is a gift, and it continues. People who were in that space, I think 40, 50 people over the course of her dying journey, continue to be touched by it. They may have forgotten that it's possible to create that experience for their loved ones, but they do touch into that presence. Jay wrote a song in Paula's honor.
I'll just say, before Mom got sick, for 10 years I worked in hospice as a music therapist. And occasionally I would find myself singing for someone, and something about that person would remind me of my mom. And I would have a wave of grief, sort of like a pre-grief for my mom. And I could just see that one day, I'd be singing for her at her bedside, which turned out to be the case. So in a way, I feel that this time of grieving for Mom while she was still very much with us and healthy and very, very much a big part of our lives. But to have this feeling of grieving for her for those years when I was working in hospice was a gift for me, and was helpful in some way. So it was during that time that I wrote this song called Not Made of Stone. Precious people in my life, I don't want to see a world without you. I found out that my home is a feeling that I get anywhere when I'm with you. Every day is a gift and a thief. Every loss is also a relief. Every dream that I've ever achieved has left me with one less dream. I know we're not made of stone. Winds of time have no trouble sweeping through, and anything I'll ever hold will be healing me while it's breaking this true heart in two. Every day is a gift and a thief. Every loss is also a relief. Every dream that I've ever achieved has left me with one less dream. I know we're not made of stone, but I don't want to see a world without you. I found out that my home is a feeling that I get anywhere when I'm with you.
Sorry. I don't think it's working right now. Thank you. Maybe we can all take a deep breath together. Another aspect to presence is also being with what is internally. So allowing for the tears, allowing for the grief to move through, to be with it all. I think part of our lack of comfort or exposure to death, dying, and grief is that we do tend to compartmentalize. And so that's something I'm learning and invite you to do as well, is just to be with the emotions, to feel the sadness, to feel the awe. And that is part of that is a gift that death has offered me, I can speak for myself, is that in remembering that our time is finite, we awaken to the infinite within us and around us. And what I mean by that is those feelings of timelessness when you're with your children, with people you love, whoever you called in that brings you joy. In those moments, that preciousness, that awareness enhances those moments. And it's actually reality. You don't know when you're going to see your loved one again. So you can start to cultivate a presence with death now by just being more aware and engaged with life, aware of the preciousness of life. Something somebody recently told me was that to really, after the death of a loved one, which is partly why we don't talk about it, right? It's almost too surreal and too painful to imagine a life without somebody you love, let alone ourselves leaving this world. Like, how is that real? And traditions around the globe have explanations or beliefs around what happens when we go. But do we really know? There are near-death experiences that are being captured and documented, and that's giving us some information about consciousness. There are physicians, neuroscientists trying to find out where consciousness resides in the brain. Nobody's found it yet. So she therefore says it doesn't exist. But does consciousness exist outside of the mind? So, I digress, but we're a roundabout way of getting to this point. Part of the reason we don't want to acknowledge death is because there is pain and grief associated with the loss of something or someone we love, the letting go. And somebody told me this recently, that to return to a place of wholeness, even with the hole left by this person's absence, so the absence of our loved one's presence, the way we return to that wholeness is by coming to a place of acceptance without resistance, judgment, or control. And that really resonated with me, because that openness to that possibility, openness to the possibility of a return to wholeness, even with the absence of someone's presence, that gives me a sense of meaning, and also, I don't know if hope is the word, but just a way forward. I'd like to share, so in terms of the gift of death awareness on our lives, in our lives, there was a young man that I already told you about, Heath and Sister, and I think there's a way to show the trailer. Okay. So this young man taught me so much about living fully in each moment and experience of life, and he showed me how all of life experiences can prepare you for the ultimate letting go, if you choose to live your life that way. He was a meditator, a yogi, a belly dancer in Bombay, India. He was a Thai masseuse, just a seeker. And he was diagnosed with a glioblastoma. And this trailer is just gives you a glimpse into the journey of Ethan Sisser and my involvement with him.
If I have more pain, if I die later today or tomorrow, it's a win. Stay present with that.
Do what you need to feel alive.
So there's a soul, a dear, blessed, loving soul named Ethan Sisser. He's 36. He was diagnosed with glioblastoma. He started documenting his journey on Facebook, TikTok, YouTube.
Doctor said there's nothing they can do. The chemo can't help. Not doing the chemo, nothing will change either. What's going to happen next is I'm going to keep a smile in my heart.
One thing I would love is a strong support system. I feel like it could be beautiful for everyone involved.
I don't know if anybody's ever done it in terms of how you're doing it.
We all are born, we all leave the body, so why not do it in the most beautiful way possible?
I'm trying to medically find a way to where he can be comfortable in a home setting.
I am embodied.
I am empowered.
I am ecstatic.
Mind if I get this off my chest now?
can only go so far.
But my sense of Ethan's state of being fills this whole area. Called for a family, and this family showed up.
Can death be fun? I mean, that could be the most exciting journey ever.
Perfect timing. So, our hospice and palliative care community in this country and globally have been working tirelessly to support this conversation. And I think what I feel called to share is that if we can support them as individuals and as community members outside of the medical system and collaborate with our medical communities, I think we can start to see a cultural shift around death and dying and grief. And so thank you for being a part of this conversation, for showing up and for doing all the good work you do in the world, whether it's to save lives or to support people in their dying journey or everything in between. Yeah, we'll close with a song, and then we'll be opening space for question and answer, called Moonflower.
Okay. And this one was written for and with a wonderful person who I met through music therapy and hospice named Hope. This was her final poem. Just real quick, a big thanks to Patrick running sound tonight. Wonderful job, man. Thank you.
And thank you again to the Palliative Care Partnership of the Roanoke Valley for being inspired to offer these kinds of programs to this community. Thank you. So we'll open it up for question and answer. And I wanted to also mention this is an Indian instrument called a harmonium. It's like an accordion. There's keys, and you pump air into it. There's bellows. I've been playing it since I was 4. you mind dimming these lights a little bit? Is that possible? Thank you. Or these, or, oh, yeah, thanks.
We often approach death and dying from such a traditional perspective, and our families, or we've already established, we as a people, we are not comfortable with death and dying. So, we have formalities and rituals that we have settled into that kind of help us work through that. So how do we broach the thought of doing death differently? With our families, how do we establish a comfort level with them to bring the children in, to do all the things that you've shared tonight?
Thank you for that question, Sharon. I think first thing is educating yourself about what options are available. There's a growing movement of death doulas, the death doula movement, inviting non-medicalized supportive care to those who are dying for their families and loved ones. And anyone can become a death doula. So if you're interested in that, there are plenty of programs and training programs, but educating yourself on the role of a death doula, how to bring someone in to guide you as you navigate death and dying of yourself or loved ones, that's a good way to start. Educating yourself on home funerals. There's a National Home Funeral Alliance that's really inviting individuals to reclaim the after-death care experience. And then I would say, so education is number one. And then what we experienced with Jay's mom. I had been educated as a home funeral guide, and I was already a death doula. And I remember when I offered Paula a home funeral, I said, we can either call a funeral home, and they can come and take you to the morgue and tend to your body, or we can take care of you at home. And she said, absolutely, I want to be at home. And then it came time when she took her last breath. Everybody in the family, the 7 sisters, the dad, Bud, and Chris, they said, I don't think we're going to be comfortable with this. It was so unfamiliar. It wasn't part of their experience of dying, caring or supporting after death care. And they didn't know if they would have the capacity, nor did the sisters. So I looked at Jay and I said, Jay, are we going to do this ourselves if nobody has the ability or willingness to? And we both agreed, yes, we're going to do this. So we have to be a little bit of a pioneer. And then when it came time to care for her, all the sisters jumped right in. They wanted to be involved. They carried her body with us up to that room. They adorned her body. They did an anointing ritual to honor her body. And so inviting people in rather than demanding that they join, I think is another way. So it's showing rather than telling. And I think it takes time. It takes experience for people to realize that what's possible and what their comfort level will be with it. But I think if you're empowered to speak your truth, to make your wishes known, do your advanced care planning, get all the medical pieces in place, create an end-of-life care plan like we do birth plans, I think the more you are clear with what you want, I think your family will want to support you. Again, you have to have conversations. It can't be all on a piece of paper and theoretical. So that's what I would say about that.
Thank you, Dr. Sethi Brown. One of the things you said is that death is not merely a medical event. And yet, many of us here who work in healthcare see on a daily basis the chaos that sometimes medical events, dying in a hospital, can bring with them. How can we help our family providers, our primary care physicians, get comfortable with enlisting supports early on so that we don't find ourselves in the chaos of an ICU? I'm not saying there's anything wrong with being in intensive care unit settings. I'm saying some of us would prefer to be at home. How do we help our physicians and our community understand when is the right time to call in additional support and be comfortable with managing that plan of care at home?
Oh, that's a big question. I don't have all the answers for that one, but we've tried educating about hospice and palliative care in our communities. We've tried to do CMEs. I think Medicare now reimburses some extra time to have these advanced care planning conversations. And I think the approach that I see as one solution is really bringing the awareness that death is a shared experience, part of our shared humanity, that the role of the physician in that conversation has a lot of weight, like acknowledging that and honoring that. I think those are the pieces that are missing. I think we tend to think as providers that it's separate from us. Just like we do, like I'm never going to get lupus or I won't get cancer, you know. So I think there's an element of the shared humanity piece, bringing that into the conversation, but I also think it's really going to be, I don't want to say it, but there is an industry of dying now. We know a lot of hospices are privatized, and that's written up in the New Yorker, and the funeral home industry is an industry that makes a profit. And so I think if consumers, I'm going to call us consumers, if we shift the conversation and we come to our providers and ask them, hey, this is what I want, and talk to them about our wishes, that may be a place where we can support physicians to shift their perspective. But it's a big conversation. It's so ingrained in us as physicians to think of death as a failure. So, yeah, it's an important conversation. And what I've found with the Center for Conscious Living and Dying, which is really more focused on the community aspect, empowering communities to learn the skills to support one another in life and death, I find that doctors, when they come on the property, we have this beautiful 6-acre property in Swannanoa, you're welcome to visit. There is a felt experience. Again, I don't think we can intellectualize this conversation because it's so much bigger than our mind can comprehend, really. And so I think there's an element of, again, slowing down enough, really tuning into this reality and what it means to be human, walking on this planet. So it's part of a bigger conversation, I think, around how we are living in this world. So it's not just a medical issue. The Lancet is this very prominent medical journal, been around since the 1800s, and they wrote a commission paper that came out in 2022 called The Value of Death, Bringing Death Back into Life. And it's looking at death globally, and it's talking about this paradox. We have these high-income countries where people are dying with aggressive interventions, a lot of access to medications and comfort care, but living longer and dying longer. And then we have these underserved, lower-income countries where there's no access to even basic pain and symptom management. And so they talk about, in that paper, you can look it up online, it's open access, they talk about this realistic utopia, like how can we do death differently in our modern world? And they speak to having conversations like this. It's not very technical, it's not very scientific, it's basic. It's returning to some of our basic human ways of relating and being in this world. So engaging in conversations around death, dying, and grief, bringing it back to the dinner table. And there's many others, 4 others you can look up. But death not being just a physiological event, but an emotional, spiritual, relational experience. That's where I got that from, that language. Enhancing networks of care to support one another. What if, a friend of mine said, what if church communities go beyond the casserole? What if we actually go deeper and offer personal care and show up so that this loved one doesn't have to go to a nursing home? Many hands make light work. How would that look if we all came together around the dying experience? So, yeah, it's a complex conversation.
You've shared this death experience with 3 young children, and I was wondering, what thoughts have they shared with the 2 of you, and what have you learned from them?
The question, I believe, is what our children have reflected back to us and what we've learned. Thank you for that question. I'll let Jay speak to that first. Do you have any thoughts?
Well, my first thought is Avi, our middle son. When Aditi's dad died last year, he hadn't cried, and our older daughter Sahana knew that he needed to cry, and she just said, "Avi, it's okay, you can cry." And he just started weeping, and he just wept and wept for several minutes, just completely letting all of his emotions out. And he was held. But this was at the sanctuary, and he was sort of held by the community in an allowed space for him to be able to weep like that. And then even the next day when we had a puja ritual, he found time to weep there as well. And it was just, it was really healing for the community to see a child being, allowed to have that space. And it helped us all, to grieve, to just see this pure child grieving for his grandfather. And then also he was able to play and have fun, with his friends, during that time as well. So he was able to be present to the grief, completely present to the grief, and then also to be present to the fun and playing soccer as well. He wasn't carrying it with him in a heavy way, So I thought that was, a really beautiful thing to witness, and it was a teacher. It taught us who witnessed that. It taught us a lot, I think.
I had friends, elder males, say, "I have never been allowed to cry like that in front of others. I've never been allowed to wail." He wailed. And so I think, I love that reflection. Sahana, our daughter, was interviewed by a friend who's doing these little montages, and she was asked that question, like, what's it like to be, have a mom who's working in this field? And she said, "Oh, death is just a part of life. No big deal." So we've really normalized it, and I think they're comfortable with it in a way that I think I may not have been. I don't know. I didn't experience death at such a young age. These children have seen so much between COVID, the death of their grandparents, and then Hurricane Helene. It's just incredible, and they're resilient. And I think the tools that we use to move through all of these challenges in life kind of are similar. It's like, how can we resource ourselves? How can we be in acceptance, letting go of control, judgment, and resistance in all the ways death shows up in our lives? And I think I'm watching these kids really move through the death of all types with a lot of grace and ease and wisdom. I trust will serve them.
I just want to say thank you for sharing your story on Jay's mother and your mother-in-law. That was beautiful and moving. As a healthcare professional, one of the deaths that I got to experience that was very spiritual and moving was a death that we had a death doula at. And I know you mentioned that you were a death doula, and I was wondering if you'd touch a little on what that experience is like, so people in the room can understand that this is an opportunity available to them and how it impacts that death journey.
Thank you. When I was invited to take a death doula training, the reason I took it was because a friend of mine, the Conscious Dying Institute in Boulder, was doing a training in Asheville, and they asked about renting that space, our music venue space. And I said, sure, and that was the trade. So that's the only reason I became a death doula. I thought, what am I going to learn that I don't already know? That's having done this work. And I was so struck by what I gained from that experience. Again, it's non-medicalized support, which I had been steeped in, right? The medicalized offerings. And it was integrating all aspects of my being. Like, this music was so separate from my life as a doctor before. And I'm now integrating these aspects of my being, which actually probably leads to less burnout and more satisfaction in my life. I think that's what's happened. And it helped me return, it gave me an understanding of death in a very embodied, visceral way that wasn't, again, intellectual. Because we've been tending to those who are dying for centuries, right? I mean, not in this form, but in terms of our human ancestors. And yeah, I think it's just a beautiful way to show up in full presence with our heart, mind, our expertise, our knowledge, and just our love, and in a way that is so grounding. I think Time magazine did an article about the death doula movement. I don't remember when it came out, but it was talking about the rise in interest in death doula work. And I think it's because how many of you have been at the bedside of someone you love and it was a kind of profound, potent experience, not a traumatic one? Wow. So yeah, you've touched into that space, right? I bet the mystics call it, I think it's unity consciousness, it's that oneness space, there's something potent about it. And I think that's why as more and more people are dying on the planet, I think people who are experiencing those deaths are accessing that or feeling that and wanting more of that, which can be reached. Those states of being, states of consciousness can be accessed in those moments, but in other ways too, right? Through meditation, through all the other ways that we can have ordinary states of consciousness experience that. So I think that's part of the draw for me too. And I experienced that not knowing this. I wouldn't have used this language as a 17-year-old at the bedside, but I think that's the piece that I felt then. So, thank you.
Hi. I live in a retirement community. I've been there about 1.5 years. And we get notified about everybody's birthdays every month. And we don't get notified about the deaths. And people just sort of disappear from our world. And I've been trying to think of ways to change that. And I just wondered if you might offer me some suggestions.
Power to you. I just want to say, wow. Yeah, this is what it's going to take, right? As we become aware, like how do we approach these phases of life, this season of life in the communities we're in. So I just celebrate that you're feeling that call. Yeah, there is much to do in the healthcare, in the elderly, the elder care homes, I would say, and communities, because there's a beautiful CCRC, Continuous Care Retirement Community in Asheville, and they've been around 75 years. It costs like $300,000 to get into it. And I spoke with some of them, and the people who were interested in the Center for Conscious Living and Dying, and they are shocked that people are coming to this aging community, but nobody's talking about death. And they know, everybody knows. They don't want to belabor that fact. They don't want it to be gloom, depressing. So they're not even having the conversation. And so there is a desire, I think, to shift that. How we do it, I think, is again by starting with the conversation about mortality, empowering individuals to start to look at their own deaths. Otherwise, they're going to continue to be, all the doors are going to be shut in the nursing homes. People are wheeled out in a black bag outside the back door in many of the nursing homes. I mean, that is how we're tending to bodies. And so I think it speaks to the discomfort around death, denial, fear, sense of failure. And I think until we acknowledge that we're mortal beings, I don't think that will shift. So it starts with, you can do conversation cafes in your community. There's something called the Death Cafe, and you can kind of create your own way of doing it, as you all have done with the partnership. And then I think finding an ally on the staff would be a good thing that wants to. Chaplains are really attuned to these realities. So that might be a good place to start. Mm-hmm. We're showing the film we've showed the film at several nursing homes in Asheville, and that's been inspiring. So you can find a film that resonates and share it, have some sort of conversation series,
Have some suggestions that we use at our facility. When someone passes, there's a candle lit and their name put by the candle. There is an agape box that people can write memories of that person that's sent to the families. Their obituaries are posted by that box. And we are starting something called No One Dies Alone at our facility. And that we have had 28 residents volunteer to be people who sit with those who are dying without anyone there, or to give families a break when they need to go out and to sit with them. And support for those who are dying is evident, and it's very meaningful.
We all want to know.
We are at the Glebe.
Wow, that's wonderful. You say the Glebe? It's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. Very inspiring. One community at a time. One soul at a time, really. I think that's how this will shift.
You've talked a bit about your daughter's visceral relationship with death and your own as well. And we've touched on the fact that before 1950, families were much more involved with death over the course of their own lives. Hospitals are increasingly including families as part of a care team. And I'm wondering how that might be an opportunity to get people thinking about their own deaths, to get them more comfortable with their own deaths, and kind of give some prophylaxis for people long before their own deaths to prepare them.
Beautiful. So you were saying that hospitals are incorporating families into the care team? Yeah, that's wonderful. That's really kind of, and family can be chosen family, right, or biologic family. And so I think the more we can engage, and that was the Lancet article talks about that, enhancing networks of care, getting creative, not just with the medical professionals, but really engaging family up early on. I definitely think that's a wonderful way to have people access this, this space, really.
Hi. I'm over here.
Thank you.
I've been anticipating this evening for so many months. I actually went to Asheville back in June. I visited the sanctuary. I met Wanda, and it was a synchronicity. There had been a passing the night before, and it was supposed to be closed, but I managed to get in. I toured the facility. It's gorgeous. I just can't express it. Like, it's just unbelievable, the energy. I loved being there and learn about the teepee and how you guys light the flame. Everything. And the husband of the lady who passed the day before, he was there that day, and I met him, and he seemed so at peace, and he was so loving, and you could just feel the energy. So I'm so appreciative of people like you exist, and I hope that your movement continues to just inspire and so many others, because I always say it takes a village to do end-of-life care. It's not easy. There's a lot of tears, and one of the sidekicks here, I would say, always find psychological help, mental health support, because caregiver burden is real, and burnout among providers, it is real. For people who are afraid of death, I would suggest that you do further research, look at the videos of those who've had end-of-life or near-death experiences. And one of my favorite TED Talks is Anita Moorjani. She had cancer, and she was a miracle. So I would say that the main takeaway point is, when we transition, it's only love. It's just peace. And we've been able to see that at the bedside. And sometimes when patients, we say they linger, and we know that they're holding on to love. And the other beauty of it is knowing when we witness that they're hallucinating, they're reaching out for others, or so we think, but their loved ones are over there, inviting them in. So there's no need to be afraid of death, because our souls live forever. So again, I'm thrilled that you guys are here. I'm thrilled that I'm here, and with so many people, like here, my friend Betty, and Katina is around. She's a chaplain. So yes, it does take a village, and it's a beautiful thing. So embrace life and dying. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
I have one comment to make. I want to go back to when someone said something about a care facility and people pass away and then they're just gone. So we had a family member that lived at the Glebe, okay? Olive Whistler. I don't know if you knew Olive, okay? And the facility isn't going to tell everyone. We as a family decided to have a memorial service for her. And when we did that, the staff were so appreciative, because families don't do that. So that's actually the obligation of the family, not the facility. The facility did not have a problem with us asking if we could do that, okay? They just cannot do that for every family that's in there. So the family has to be the advocate for the event. And the same with bringing family in for treatment. The problem that I see is that a lot of my family are reluctant. They can't wait when they go into the doctor's office for the physician to say, okay, you can go home now. And then I'll call and I'll be like, hey, Ma, how did the appointment go? Oh, he says I'm doing fine, right? So one of the things that I do for all of my family members, if anybody has a smartphone, it'll have a memo feature on it. And if yours doesn't, download it. When you go into the doctor's appointment, turn it on, okay? Don't ask for permission, just turn it on. Then when you go home, you can go back and you can listen to what was said. All right? And if you don't understand something, look it up. And don't go to WebMD, okay? All right, go to a reputable medical site and try to get your definitions, okay? And that goes for every level of care, all right? When it comes to planning your own death, until you've been given an expiration date, it is difficult to wrap your mind around what that means. 3 years ago, I was given a 3-year expiration date, okay? So right now, I'm on borrowed time. Coming to grips with knowing that you might not be here tomorrow is difficult to do. And I'm not pulling anybody's leg, okay? It is something that you have to do yourself. And it is a very difficult conversation, okay? And that's pretty much what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much.
I believe how many of the older people thanked them for the closure.
Yeah, everybody that we ran into, when they realized who we were, we being my wife and I, and the relation that we had with the person that had passed, they were extremely appreciative of the fact that they were told that someone had passed and who it was, and they're giving them the opportunity to come in and say their piece. And that was really sweet, especially for the staff. Because, I don't know how many staff members are here. They're my mother-in-law volunteers right now with hospice. And, you get attached to these patients. My father had dementia and PTSD and everything, and he was in a facility for 18 months before he passed. And you get attached to the staff because you're there so much as a family member of a loved one. And so it's nice to see them and give them closure. They came to my father's funeral. We had a traditional funeral for him. So I appreciate you guys coming and explaining your journey or story, however you want to look at it, or what you want to label it. But it's definitely an interesting topic, and difficult at times, and frustrating, and beautiful. You know what I mean?
Yes.
So thanks.
Full scope of the human experience, all the emotions.
I have a question. I understand the beauty of being in the home with the community and creating that space.
Thank you, sir.
I'd like to, if you could, give a couple of maybe jewels of wisdom for how to bring this into the hospital setting, because some families don't have that option, or the staff themselves, they don't have family, and the staff themselves become their community. And you've got to work with what you've got. What would you say, what jewels would you put out to us for that?
Just to make sure I'm understanding, tools for bringing some more community elements into the hospital setting when people are dying?
Well, how do you, I know how to do it in the home. How do you do it in the hospital setting, the clinical setting? How do you, I mean, do you have any ideas for how we could do that better in the hospital setting, where families may not have that option to be able to move into a home, or may not have family that could be their community, and their community is actually their nurses?
Yeah.
Or, you know, housekeeping or bath aides. It's just asking for some ideas of how to maybe bring some of this into the hospital setting and still be able to honor that person.
Yeah, you know, my father was in the ICU. He had fallen and had a traumatic brain bleed and stayed in the ICU for 16 days, intubated. And when we extubated him, we thought he would die shortly after, and our plan was to transport him to the Center for After-Death Care, but he stabilized. And in that transition time where we thought he was going to die, we brought all these elements in. And the nurses were so supportive of bringing more family in and friends. And I get that that's in a situation where he had family to support, but we still were invited and allowed to bring all the elements, aromatherapy, whatever we wanted to bring in. And I think at the Center for Conscious Living and Dying, as we rally community, we have about 300 volunteers. And we have explored ways like the No One Dies Alone program. If we can enhance volunteer support for these intimate times, then the NODA program, No One Dies Alone, is an awesome supportive service if you have it in your community.
We do.
So that's one. And then, yeah, empowering nurses to be a loving presence in those moments, I think, is another, if they don't have family. Yeah.
Thank you.
Hey, I wonder if you could maybe start from the beginning about the center and why you established it, and a little bit more about what you all do there.
Yeah. How much time do I have? Do we have a few minutes? Okay. So after Ethan died, during the Ethan journey, I call it, it was sort of towards the end of the pandemic, and people were so hungry for community. And people were coming up to me in that journey saying, hey, can we just open a house and start doing this for one another? They were so enlivened. You know, they brought their gifts, their music, their food, their acupuncture, their massage, their presence to take turns and just, again, accessing that space and being together in that space. And so when I chose to put my notice in without a plan, which was not like me, very, very linear historically, I started researching what is it that we did for Ethan that was so different. Like, we have hospice. Hospice came into the home. We just provided the caregiving support. We provided the family because he didn't have enough family members to care for him. His mother and father were unable to care for him. They were separated and had health issues. And so I researched community-supported end-of-life care, and I found in the literature the social model for hospice. So we actually don't use that term for what we're doing because people still don't know what hospice is, and it's confusing. So we say community-supported death care. But if you look up social model for hospice, this is a global approach to death and dying that involves community, involves volunteer support, involves caregiving support, using hospice services to come into the home. So we actually don't call our home a facility, it's a home. And I found this network called the Omega Home Network. And during the AIDS crisis, when individuals were kicked out of their homes or no longer invited back in, and the hospitals couldn't take care of them, nuns and other volunteers, different communities opened their home and cared for people who were dying. And this network, the Omega Home Network, they're all nonprofits. Every state has different regulations and requirements. So if you want to look, I don't know if Virginia has an Omega Home, but that's essentially the kind of the caregiving that we're offering. So we provide volunteer-led direct care for up to 3 residents at a time. They have a 2 months or less prognosis. DNR, we're not doing any heroic interventions and even letting go of some of the treatments just to really support them to leave their body, offering any complementary alternative modality they want through volunteer support. And I thought that's what all we were going to do is just focus on the direct care and the social model for hospice. But what we found was we have more volunteers interested in serving in this way. It's actually part of this movement of bringing death back into life, and people are so enlivened. So we have a pretty robust community. We have a death doula training program. We offer events and programs, and music is woven in through everything, and educational offerings. So it's still evolving, and we're not sustainable yet. So we're still finding our way. But it's clearly inspired others to explore this for their own communities, which really is the vision, I think, for people to get creative with the resources they have, you all to get creative, and tend to those who are dying when caregiving insufficiency, we call it, is a real thing and will continue to be. So thank you for the question.
Yes, I just wanted to add to it after having received a scary diagnosis myself last year. Is a good way to live life is to allow yourself to be vulnerable to others. Working at Korean with Keeley Healing Arts Program, talk to a lot of patients, and the best way to allow them to express themselves is to be completely open, how they feel about death, how they feel about life. Just allow people to tell their version of their story 100%. And I think that's just the way it goes through life. You should just allow people to open up to you. And if they have something to talk to you about, allow them to ask the question. Don't shut them off because everybody's afraid to talk about death. No, allow them to talk about it. And then make yourself vulnerable. If you're dealing with something, if you're afraid of something, if you make yourself vulnerable, it will allow people to open up to you. And then that way we can be more conscious of how other people feel. But if you meet someone and they're on their deathbed and they want to talk about it, just talk about it, period. And then don't say, well, we don't want to, and then skip to sports or something. There's nothing wrong with that. But I'm saying if they really do, tell them, the way that you feel about it. But the whole thing is that, the way we embrace it is to live each moment and to continue to tell people, hey, it's okay, but, I'll see you tomorrow. Still say you'll see someone tomorrow, because how do you know? You don't know when that moment is going to come. So still encourage people to be themselves and to be happy, even if they have a short time, but to always open up and then make yourself vulnerable to their needs, but to talk about it to children as well. Someone asked, how do you talk to children about it? Well, you be honest with children. But at the same time, you're not going to just go into great detail to, ruin a child. But I'm saying you got to still be honest and explain to them what it is. But no, this from last year to now, having been able to deal with patients has also brought life to me to deal with these folks. So that's what it's all about. Life is about community, and talking to someone about death is also about community. But we all need each other at the end of the day. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a powerful way to close this evening. Thank you again for your time and your attention and your presence. There's some information outside about the Center for Conscious Living and Dying, and you're welcome to check us out and stay in touch. Join our mailing list. And thank you again.
If you all would please join me in thanking Jay and Dr. Brown for joining us this evening. Our hope on behalf of the Palliative Partnership of the Roanoke Valley and our sister chapters in the New River and Shenandoah Valleys is that we have collectively taken another step forward in empowering our community not to be afraid of what lies ahead, but to be accepting, vulnerable in, present in what lies ahead, and not to be controlled by a diagnosis, but for us to own our own destiny in that way of maneuvering and navigating through a very complex health system. Some of those complexities can be managed differently, and hopefully what we've inspired tonight in this conversation with Dr. Sethi Brown and Jay is that we take control and ownership of helping our medical community and our local community understand that through living, our death can be even further gratifying and compassionate and loving to those around us. Please be careful as you go home tonight. Thank you again for joining us, and thank you again, Dr. Sethi Brown and Jay.